Well, those that know me have heard me say many times that FFA changes the lives of young people, and I know that firsthand, me personally as well as many others I've been able to watch over the years. The classroom instruction, ag education, both in and out of the classroom, as well as the leadership experiences, have a tremendous impact on young people. Another thing about FFA that's important to me is the fact that I know without question it has programs for the best and brightest young people. They're going to be successful, Brenda, no matter what. At the same time, it has programs for those that haven't quite found their niche. They're looking for that mentor, the opportunity to experience success, and FFA provides that opportunity for young people throughout this great country. So I'm very sold on the whole concept of FFA. And my situation is I grew up in Western Kentucky, and as a young farm boy, loved agriculture, knew a little bit about agriculture, but FFA opened my eyes. Somewhere along the way, I learned to be a goal setter and set examples down the road, and I think FFA was a big part of that. I was very blessed to have three wonderful advisors, Mr. Clyde Grace Jr., Mr. Ray Fowler, Mr. Gary Schaefer. All three gentlemen had a big impact, and you appreciate those people that care about you. All the judging trips, state fair events, FFA camp, national convention, the night meetings, the weekend planning and practicing and visiting the farm, all of those things come together to show that these men cared about us as students, and I appreciate that. And to this day, I reflect back often about the impact they had on me. In addition to that, I had a unique experience in FFA, going through and being chapter farmer each year and being my chapter farmer my senior year. That was a big deal for me as a grain, livestock, tobacco producer as a young farmer. Pursued agriculture as a college degree, and my VOAG teacher had a big impact on that as we visited colleges and talked about opportunities. When you go to national conventions, you're exposed to people, you're exposed to speakers and careers, the trade show, all of those things come together. And it's hard to identify which ones really made a difference, but you know collectively they all had an impact. So I encourage young people to still be involved and take those opportunities that those advisors provide for them. As a state FFA officer, I had an opportunity to go on the Goodwill tour. And we visited all of our major sponsors. The Kentucky Farm Bureau was one of those. And I remember visiting the state office of Kentucky Farm Bureau back when it was located on Hubbard's Lane. I attended a staff meeting. I had no idea that 4 years later I'd be sitting around that same staff table. But after we finished our meeting and expressed appreciation for what they did for FFA, Mr. John Kuhn, the executive secretary of the organization, took me to lunch. And after lunch, we got our photos made by the front entrance, and he gave me his card. And he said, "When are you going to be getting out of college?" And I said, "Well, Mr. Kuhn, I'm a freshman." And he said, "Well, drop me a note. I might have something." I kept his card. 3 years later, I wrote him a letter. And then I went to work. I graduated on Saturday, started Farm Bureau on Monday, and been there over 38 years. And fortunately now I hold the same position Mr. Kuhn did at the time that we had lunch that day. So it had an impact on me. And I tell the state officer team, when I have opportunity to visit with them after they've just been selected and we have the luncheon with the retiring FFA officers and incoming officers, that you'll never know who you'll meet during that year to be able to have an impact on your life. And I encourage them to spend every minute they can, because they only get that one opportunity to do that. Take advantage of every opportunity. It's important. And I'm one that was blessed with those opportunities, and I see those around me down through the years have had similar experiences. So FFA, through the instruction in the classroom, outside the classroom, the leadership experiences afforded to you through the programs, the advisors that care for you, sometimes they're kind of hard and you wonder what they're up to, but their commitment is to you. And that makes a big difference. So I think that's one of the reasons we see so many people in FFA that go on to have excellent careers, whether on the farm, in public office, business owners and operators, managers. We see that success of those people. I think a lot of it goes back to those roots in the classroom and those leadership experiences for them through the FFA in vocational agriculture.
What type of activities, this just brings to mind, what did Farm Bureau sponsor when you were here? Because you know they do everything now, or as far as FFA and 4-H.
Well, they've always sponsored parliamentary procedure and those type things. And that's another point I'd like to mention, Brenda, that I've been very blessed to be employed in an organization that we share a common belief in. So not only as an individual wanting to support FFA as I do as an individual, but also the organization I work for, being able to be a big part of that. I've had the opportunity through the Farm Bureau to work in Frankfort, in Washington on issues important to vocational education, extended employment, funding for FFA camps. Pretty much any issue comes down the road that's important to FFA, vocational agriculture. Kentucky Farm Bureau's been there and continues to be there from our policy given to us by our members. So I've been very fortunate to be able to work with an organization that we have the same common belief in. So not only personally believing that, experiencing that, I have an opportunity professionally to continue to work in that area. As we say here during this state convention, Farm Bureau sponsors a number of awards. One of the things we do that I remember being a state officer, sitting around that table at our first meeting, and they bring all that information out to you, all that stack of paper and everything, and a gentleman walked up and handed us a Farm Bureau briefcase. And when I became executive officer, I said, let's go back and do that again. And so for 20-something years now, we've been giving every new state officer a briefcase because it's something they can put to use immediately as they gather their information and organize their work for the coming year. I started Farm Bureau in May of '77, and we had a legislative session in '78, and we had funding for extended employment for vocational agriculture teachers. But we had a new governor, John Y. Brown, came in '80, and Mr. Schultz was working in the superintendent of public instruction's office. He was deputy, and he was originally from Murray, Kentucky, I believe. And they put together the budget, and they did not include extended employment as being automatic for vocational agriculture teachers. And so we got involved and realized that was going to be an issue. We had meetings with the governor, we had several meetings with the Department of Education, and then we took our case to the legislature. Your local representative, Mark Farrell, was a state houseman at the time. He worked with us, and we were successful collectively getting legislation passed requiring extended employment vocational agriculture teachers. And the reason we did that, we had policy supporting that, but I'm a strong believer, an organization believes, that if you have the skills and the traits and qualities, the characteristics to be a good vocational agriculture teacher, you can write your own ticket in the private sector. And I really believe that. And we wanted those people to be able to benefit from 12-month employment. But in addition to that, it's important to have those experiences during the summer months with those students, whether it be county fair, state fair, judging teams, on the farm visits. All the preparation goes into those activities, FFA convention, FFA camp. Those are important leadership growth opportunities, and you need that advisor during those summer months. And I know there's sometimes some jealousy with others in school administration and other educators at the high schools, but it's important for this program. This program is unique, and we can't take that for granted. We've got to make sure we continue to seek opportunity to see that that program is properly funded for benefit of the young people who go through FFA, vocational agriculture. Well, the Kentucky Farm Bureau wants to sponsor their events too. You know, we provide the watches for the retiring teachers, 27 years of teaching. In fact, I'll share my father-in-law was a very respected ag teacher and an adult farm teacher. And his passing, my mother-in-law gave me his watch because it was engraved, and I still have his watch to this day. And I think about that tradition continue. We want to recognize them for their service. And everyone needs to be recognized. And the role of a vocational agriculture teacher is provide opportunities for others and seeing others being recognized. And we want to make sure they're recognized among their peers, among professional agriculture leaders in this state for the service and the commitment they make to young people. A critical part is overall formula for success for our Kentucky youth. So we want to do that. Each year you have your meetings, our organization is invited to come, be there to say a few words, and provide support. We think that's important professionally. And I applaud their efforts because peers need to get together, share ideas, good things and bad things, what works, what doesn't work. So that network, I would encourage all teachers, particularly young teachers, if they're not involved, get involved in association. You learn from each other. Sure, the classroom's important, your college instruction is critical to your success, but that peer relationship with other teachers, sharing success stories, but also identifying problems and finding solutions is key to your success as a long-term successful vocational agriculture instructor. I applaud the foundation. I think it's done a lot of good work. Fundraising is a challenge. Someone has to take responsibility for it, and the foundation does a really good job. I know many members of your board. Our president serves on your board, Mr. Mark Haney. Beth Wisman serves on your board. I've known many people like you, Brenda, that serve. I think one of the unique things you do is recognizing those teachers that makes a difference. Even though he had passed away, we got together last year and recognized Mr. Ray Fowler, Mr. Harold Wortman, Mr. Dwight Armstrong, and I said all three were fortunate to have the same ag teacher, Mr. Ray Fowler. So we got together and said we want to recognize him. Well, he's passed, but his wife, his children, and grandson that's involved with FFA got to be here for the ceremony. And that was special to see that family recognized for the commitment that Mr. Fowler made to young people. So we were glad to be a part of that. That's facilitated by the foundation. Those dollars go back into state programs, but half of those dollars raised goes back to the local chapter. So I think that's important how you do that. The license plate program, we supported that. In fact, I was talking with them, and I think the first phrase we came up with was growing our future and dealing with that. That's what, to me, we're doing. But the license plate, another way where both 4-H and FFA benefits from that program, and I think that's the spirit here in Kentucky. We're not competing with each other. We're competing for each other to do good work for Kentucky's youth. So I applaud the FFA, the foundation's been a great example, and I hope it continues to play a role. I'll share a story about Mr. Fowler. I was in the shop as a freshman, and upstairs, up at the top of the steps, was his office. And he had a high school senior that was getting ready to graduate. And this high school senior had been our FFA president. And this young man was not going to pursue a college education. He was going into the job market, was going to be starting a family. And Mr. Fowler had a conversation with him like a father-son. I heard that conversation. I was eavesdropping. I shouldn't have heard everything he was saying, but I did. That changed my whole impression of Mr. Ray Fowler, because I knew then he cared about that young man, which emphasized to me he cared about us too. And I saw him give of himself, give of his life experiences to help influence a young man that was getting ready to make some major decisions in his life. I overheard that conversation, and that was important. But I also remember Mr. Fowler, as we had our parliament procedure team planning and all that, his wife Sue was always there with him. It was a team effort. She brought the food, she brought the snacks, she kept us on time, she was the timekeeper, she was his partner in that, and we watched his daughters grow up around that. We would compete. If I was going to be in a contest, if I won, he bought me a steak. If I lost, I bought him one. So a little competition there helps. But I learned a lot from Mr. Fowler.
Were you on his meat judging team?
I did meat judging, did livestock soil judging, we did tobacco grade, we did it all. And he expected us to. And we would compete for it. And then we would get our scores. The goal was to make all the teams, knowing you couldn't be on every team every year. But you'd make all the teams you could, then you could figure out who got 5th and 6th place. So if you took this one, did your buddy get that one? So we would do that. So it was, we learned a lot, but also we lost our principal during my high school career, and he served as interim principal. So you can imagine being an FFA guy and your ag teacher being an interim principal.
Amazing.
So that was an interesting opportunity then to watch his leadership in administration as well as provide support in the classroom. But we were in Louisville for the FFA convention, and he said, "David, I want you to meet a young man." He said, "A former student of mine." So we got in the car, we drove to Frankfurt for him to buy me a steak, because he owed me a steak. And then we went down to the Capitol, and in the annex, in the basement of the Capitol, was a former student of his. And the guy walked out with cowboy boots on and a cowboy hat, and Mr. Harold Wortman. He said, "David, I want you to meet Harold Wortman, a former student of mine. Mr. Wortman, I want you to meet David Beck." And that's the first time I met Harold. I didn't realize that when I started Farm Bureau that Harold and I would be on committees dealing with the North American Sale of Champions, the first Sale of Champions. But I think back of those experiences that Mr. Fowler cared about his students even after they left the classroom. He stayed in touch with them, he worked with them, and continued to be in contact with them. And years later, after he retired, he would call me sometimes, and we would talk. We talked politics, talked religion, talked family, and eventually he'd get around to a legislative issue. He said, "David, what's Frankfurt doing on this issue? What do you think's going to happen on that? Anything we can do?" So he was always interested, but he maintained a good network of his former students. I grew up on a farm. My folks had property in town and out in the community. I raised beef cattle. I love beef cattle. I wanted to farm full time. Beef cattle was my deal. I raised Birdie and Dark tobacco to pay the bills. We raised some grain,
Yeah.
but livestock, raised hogs. I participated in the pig chain as a freshman. We all know about the pig chain deal, but I love beef cattle. An FFA convention in Kansas City gave me an opportunity to visit the National Hereford headquarters. And I wanted to do Hereford cattle. I wanted to do polled Hereford. Went down to Tennessee and bought a bunch of heifers. And but my grandfather on my mother's side had Black Angus. And we had a neighbor that had a lot of Charolais. And we started having some calving product with his bull. We got over in our pens. And I wound up borrowing a Black Angus bull from my grandfather, started raising black baldies before it was popular. But we had no calving problems after that. But I think back to the National FFA Convention. I had an opportunity to participate in Kansas City, and that was a great road trip, traveling with my colleagues and doing that. But then I had an opportunity. Harold Wortman called me one day. In fact, we were at a restaurant. He walked over and talked to me. He said, "David, got an idea I want to get with you on." We were in Louisville. He said, "What if we could recruit the National FFA to Louisville, Kentucky?" And I had never even given any thought to the idea, but see, someone somewhere had to have the vision, and Harold Wortman had that vision. So he asked me to be part of his team to help recruit the National FFA to Louisville. And who would have thought, after 85 years in Kansas City, that we'd have an opportunity of moving that national convention to Louisville? So I think back to that. So I had an opportunity as a young person to attend national conventions, but I also had an opportunity as an adult in my career to attend national conventions, to judge contests and be involved, but also being involved in recruiting. And with Harold's role, he asked me to chair the host committee. And so several years now I've been hosting the National Convention Committee to have them in Louisville, and I've enjoyed doing that. And again, we love the sponsors. We got to have the sponsors. But why we do this is for the young people. I want those young people to have the same experience that I had, because I think it makes a difference.